In this video, we're going to take a look at Sailor Bungubox Black of Score. Let's jump straight to the end with my opinion. This is a good, solid, dark black, almost all the time in the writing. I like it how it really has no shading. It performs the way I want a black ink to write, with no tone variation. Now, it's solid almost all the way. I was surprised that it wasn't as water resistant as I have kind of expected on a bunch of Sailor inks, so spoiler alert for when you see that. I will say that a negative when it comes to this ink is that when using it with the italic oblique nib, I did see some gray areas in the writing, and I suspect I would get the same thing with a stub nib, especially since this italic oblique is a little drier. So a dry stub, I would kind of expect a little bit of gray areas in some of the writing, which is a real shame for how nice this ink looks when it's dark and thick on the page. Those thick, dark lines and the variation that I'm getting in the writing sample really do look good. They make my handwriting look better than it is, I think. And that's one of the nice things. Now, when it comes to dark blacks like this, I always feel like it gives a little bit of, it's an older writing. It's the gray that just seems off. I don't know what that problem is, or it just makes me not want a bottle of it. Not that it's bad. Sailor makes great inks, but I just don't want a bottle of this. Love the fact that I tested it, though. It's a great ink. I like to change things up by using a different pen each day. Today that pen is a Mr. Pen Italics Chaplin's Tankard with an oblique italic nib. It's inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. To see how I arrived at that opinion, let's take a look at the first writing sample done on Clairfontaine. Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, no shading, beautiful, nice and dark all the way through. The medium nib is the same tone as the fine. The only reason it may appear at times a little bit darker is the thicker lines help it look a bit darker. Now, it has no feather, it has no spread, it has no shading. It is a great, solid black line looking great on the page. I'm going to probably say great a couple times. The stub nib has no feather, no spread. It is the same tone that we get with the medium and with the fine. Now, if you were to look at the word wood, at the OU, you do see a little bit of the gray coming through when I talked about the drier stubs. So it doesn't shade, but it lacks in some areas. And that's one of the things I like about using this paper is it really will show you all of what an ink has to offer. So it doesn't happen very often. You see it on the second line in the word not. So the gray doesn't come out a lot, but it does come out from time to time. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding, no ghosting.
To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Pilot Metropolitan with a fine nib, a Pilot Metropolitan with a medium nib, a Pilot Metropolitan with a 1.0 stub, The next writing sample is done in a FieldNotes Steno notebook.
Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, no shading, nothing but a nice solid black line. Really looks good here. It is a little bit duller of a black than we had on the Clairfontaine, but it's a much more absorbent paper, so that can be expected. The medium nib has no feather, but it looks a little off. Look at the word "the" right next to the word "off" on the top line of this medium writing, and it does look like it wants to feather. It looks like it may be spreading just a little bit, but I generally want to say that there is no feather and no spread. It performed great here. We have no tone variation whatsoever, no shading happening. The stub nib has the same tone as the medium and the fine. It has no feather. It has no spread. It also doesn't show any of those gray tones coming through, so it's not shading at all. It is just doing a great job on this paper at being a nice dark black ink. Looking at the back of the page, you do see that in the medium especially, it comes to be a lot of ghosting, but you could probably use the back of the page. I would not, but none of this bled through and touched the page underneath.
I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The next writing sample is done in an AmPad Steno notebook.
Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, no shading whatsoever. Really looks good. This paper is really making this look even better as a nice dark black ink. Fantastic. The medium nib is the same tone as the fine. It has no feather. It has no spread. It has no shading. It's performing beautifully. The stub nib has no feather, no spread, no shading. Doing good. This paper is really doing very well with this ink. Very impressive for inexpensive paper. Looking at the back of the page, you see that there is a lot of ghosting and there's no using the back of the page. However, it did not bleed through and touch the page underneath.
Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. This smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it.
And here we see the results of the resistance test.
The next writing sample is done in a National Steno notebook.
Looking at the fine nib, it has no feather. It has no spread. It has no shading. It is doing really well here. I like testing on the inexpensively produced papers just because of being able to see what an ink might do, and this is really holding itself together very well. Looking at the medium nib, it is the same tone as the fine with no feather, no spread, no shading, nothing but a pure black line, doing very well. Looking at the stub nib, we get no feather, no spread. I feel like I'm seeing a little bit of tone variation, but it's only the slightest when you're going from in burned, the first word on the first line, and the B to the U, it looks just a little bit lighter. In alive, the A looks just a little bit lighter than the rest of the word. But on the majority, I really want to say that there's no shading and it's performing well. It's that issue of this ink in a stub nib. Looking at the back of the page, we get a normal amount of ghosting and there was no bleed through to the other side.
With over 1,000 inks reviewed, let's take a look at some color comparables. Here is Birmingham Pen Company's Emerald View Park Oxidized Brass. Here is Noodler's Borealis Black. Here is Papier Plume Black. Here is Pilot Mixable Black. The next writing sample is done in an Office Depot Steno notebook.
Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, we get no spread, we get no shading, we get a beautiful black ink. We've heard that a few times, and that is exactly what is happening. In the medium nib, we have the same tone as the fine with no feather, no spread, no shading, beautiful in how it looks on the page. If you like using black inks, I definitely could see this one being worth buying. I know they're costly, but I think a good performing ink is worth the money. The stub nib is the same tone as the medium and the fine. It has no feather, no spread, no shading, beautiful all the way through. Great performance on this paper. Looking at the back of the page, there's a minimal amount of ghosting. It's really not coming through. You could use the back of the page, and it definitely did not touch the page underneath. There's no bleeding.
While it's nice to find other inks in the same color family, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page.
Here is Diatramensis Fuchsia.
Here is KWZ Baltic Memories. Here is Levenger Pinkley. Here is Pilot Peacock. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper.
Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather. Just kidding. We've done so well for so long, you just can't help but maybe try and skip it through. But it's there. There's a lot of tiny feathers, but it's completely manageable on this paper. Considering what the paper is, I would say this is very good. There is a tiny bit of spread, though it doesn't come up to a medium. It comes up to more like a medium fine. It's a little bit more than this fine that's here. The medium nib has a tiny bit of feathering all over it, but it is manageable. That's there. You can really see it come through quite a bit when you get into the second full line of writing. When you see the word temporary, you're going to see a lot of tiny feathers all over the writing. It's definitely there. It has a tiny bit of spread. It has zero shading, so otherwise it's looking very good. The stub nib in this case give the best writing that's there. There's very little, if any, feathering whatsoever. It's because it's drier and it's sort of squeegeeing some of that away. There's only a couple moments that I see some feathering, like the S in Since on the top line. Other than that, there's very little, only a couple of moments, no real feathering. There's no spread, there's no shading. It's doing really well. Looking at the back of the page, it did not come through and touch the page underneath. It didn't bleed through. There's a lot of ghosting, which is to be expected with this paper.
So what nib and pen do I think is going to give the best writing experience with this ink?
Whatever you do, don't choose a dry stub nib, just to keep the full dark lines that you can have. Those nice, solid black. No dry stibs, absolutely not. But any other pen you want to put it in with a standard round nib, I didn't try any of the other many types of nibs that are out there, but on any kind of standard round nib, it worked flawlessly. So pick your favorite pen as long as it has a standard nib in it, and then it's a dealer's choice. Go and have fun.
I hope you got something out of this video, and if you did, do all that YouTubery stuff. Thanks for watching.